So, a while back, I made a video on this channel about yearning men in period dramas, and I deliberately left out Mr. Darcy from that list because honestly, what would have been the point? Like, he would have won. Mr. Darcy is going to be the most popular period drama romantic lead until the end of time. And I say that with full affection and zero arguments. I set him aside, gave non-Jane Austen men a fair shot. Most of the comments were not about who I actually picked as like the best yearning men in period dramas besides Mr. Darcy. So many comments. For the people who know John Thornton, there is not even a competition. Now, is he the most selfless yearner in the genre? No. But is John Thornton the strongest, completely structurally built for yearning romantic lead in the 19th century that has ever been produced? I genuinely think so. And today, I want to tell you exactly why. Before we get to some historical yapping, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Merit Beauty. Merit Beauty is a clean, vegan, cruelty-free, minimalist makeup brand, and as someone with really sensitive skin and rosacea, I love products that don't irritate my redness, but still give me a very natural and effortless look. I'm getting ready to go to a food festival, so I'm going to do a quick routine for my everyday. My face is washed and moisturized and primed with serum, and so I'm gonna start out with the Uniform Tinted Mineral Sunscreen. I know that I'm gonna be in the sun for several hours, so it's great to have this as a light coverage that I know is gonna help protect me from the sun. I think it's 50 SPF. For someone like me that's got rosacea on my cheeks, I love the fact that I can have a really light coverage and then just go back in on my cheeks and build up that coverage. Next, I am applying the Bronze Balm just to add some natural warmth and dimension into my face. It's a buildable cream formula that is honestly impossible to mess up. I'm not the best at bronzers, to be fair, and it blends in really easily. Now I am applying the Flush Balm. So this is in the shade Stockholm, which is a really nice baby pink color that's not cakey or heavy. I'm matching my blush with the Andy lip blush, which is also a lovely light pink shade here. And it's great because it's already naturally enhancing the colors that I have on my lips already. And it's really breathable and smooth. All right, time for mascara. I am lucky enough to have naturally long lashes, which is really nice, but the downside is they can clump so easily. And what I love about Merit's formula is that it gives a really clean, buildable volume. And there we are. If you would like to try out Merit for yourself, they've got a limited time offer where all orders will receive a sneak peek of their next launch, which is a new mascara, and all customers will also get a free makeup bag with their order. My link includes sets up to 15% off with the new mascara included. I love Merit's packaging because the products are really lightweight. They're great for summer travel, gives me a great quick, natural look for everyday coverage and also for my videos. So check out Merit for yourself in the link in my description. And thank you so much to Merit for sponsoring this video. Welcome back to Regency Rumors. I'm Kayla, and here on my channel, I talk about period dramas, history, and historical fiction. And today, we are doing a video I have genuinely been wanting to make for a very long time. We are talking about Elizabeth Gaskell's North and South, and we are making the argument that John Thornton is a more romantic, more complex, and more compelling lead than Mr. Darcy. I'm so nervous about making this claim. So, North and South is an 1854 novel by Elizabeth Gaskell, adapted into what I would argue is the finest BBC period drama ever made in 2004. The basic premise follows a young woman named Margaret Hale, who is from southern England and is uprooted from her comfortable, genteel life and relocated to the grimy, loud, industrial northern mill town of Milton, where she meets mill owner and all-around difficult man, John Thornton, and they cannot stand one another. Instead of country estates and drawing rooms, you have factory floors and labor strikes and people dying of preventable lung disease. Lots of light, fun period drama material. Now, John Thornton. I don't even know where to begin. Like, my heart is already racing. I'm so excited about making this video and talking about this. He is tall, he is dark, he is grumpy, he is distant. It's always these men created by women, y'all, that actually live up to our expectations. You cannot fully appreciate North and South without understanding Elizabeth Gaskell, in my opinion. Elizabeth Gaskell was born in 1810, and she spent a significant portion of her adult life in Manchester, which is the real-life prototype for Milton, the fictional industrial city at the heart of North and South. Victorian Manchester was the world's first industrial powerhouse. It was often called Shock City because the pace of its growth was terrifying to the Victorian mind. Now, I want to be really clear here before I say anything that could be misconstrued. I love Jane Austen. You subscribers know that. I love Pride and Prejudice. I have an entire channel dedicated to talking a lot about Jane Austen. But what I want to argue is that Gaskell took flavors of what Austen built and evolved it significantly. And that evolution deserves more recognition than it gets. I want to be careful here because I'm not saying this as a criticism of Austen, but the world that Darcy inhabits is one where the real machinery of wealth and power is mostly kept off page. Pemberley is beautiful. We see the grounds, the house, the statues. What we don't see is where the money actually comes from on like a ground up level, how the estate actually runs. Gaskell refused that vagueness. She dropped the same enemies to lovers and class conflict and, the proud hero and interesting heroine, but she put it in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. And suddenly you see way more of Margaret and Thornton's flaws as it came to how they saw the harder parts of the world, which automatically opens you up to potentially not liking them, where Austen always makes Mr. Darcy's day-to-day life and his background vague enough where you don't really have room to do so other than kind of being like, well, he's prideful. Okay, John Thornton is a self-made man. He is the definition of like pulling up your bootstraps because he actually had to do that. His father died by after financial ruin. I think in the novel, Thornton is like 16, 17 years old. He left school, took whatever work he could find, supported his mother and sister, and paid off every penny of his father's debts through what the novel describes as toiling and suffering. He builds himself from nothing. He manages his mill directly. He is in it. There is no Pemberley, no inherited estate. He's a man who has to know to the penny, to the hour, exactly what everything costs. Mr. Darcy is, in almost every meaningful way, a chivalrous and genuinely respectful man. He is better than most men in his class. We love that for Elizabeth. He helps Lydia and Wickham, which is a significant generous thing to do. Wickham's father was employed by Darcy's father. So even at his most generous, Darcy is operating within his own sphere. His wealth is never interrogated or challenged in any way. I feel like we infer, because his father was so generous to Mr. Wickham, that he makes a good estate owner. That he comes from a family who wants to treat the people who work for them right. So we have that going for Mr. Darcy. But how he sees Elizabeth's circumstances beneath him tells me he also incredibly cares about his place in the world. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm glad we don't know more about Mr. Darcy because I don't know if the answer would be comfortable. Part of the reason I think we love him is because we have very limited knowledge around how he sees the world. His moral growth, as beautiful and necessary as it is, essentially goes as far as getting over his pride about marrying someone from a slightly less prestigious family, but still within his general social class, which is growth, and I am not dismissing that. And him getting with someone working class would have been completely scandalous, but him deciding to get with Elizabeth when she's still in the gentry class, it is a contained kind of growth. It doesn't cost him a completely different worldview to be with Elizabeth, or cost him his entire reputation to be with her. It's not as if his life would change in any significant way if he were to marry her. There's no massive barriers other than his grumpy aunt. Here's the thing about John Thornton and his level of yearning. I remember watching fan edits of North and South when I was like 18 on YouTube and being like, oh my gosh. What makes it more devastating than Mr. Darcy's longing is that it's not just romantic, in my opinion. It is layered with guilt and responsibility and this constant grinding tension between duty and desire. His feelings for Margaret don't exist in a clean emotional space where he is just used to waking up as an heir. His feelings are tangled up with the rent and the workers and his aging mother's pride and his own understanding of what he does and doesn't deserve. He is a man whose love for a woman is happening simultaneously with labor strikes and bankruptcy threats and moral reckonings about the people who work for him. Could Darcy also have more estate-based worries? Yeah, maybe, sure. But his troubles with Wickham are about the only thing we know that is an actual hardship in his life. We get to love Darcy as almost a perfect specimen of a man. Extremely rich, respectable, honorable, handsome, young, because in reality, and don't hate me guys, we know very, very little about him at the end of the day. And that does not mean I think Pride and Prejudice is flat or basic. And I don't want to know, quite frankly. I like the idea that what we see on page with Mr. Darcy is what we get. But with Thornton, Gaskell puts him right in the middle of how the money is made, and it's not glamorous. It's messy. There is no way for him to be a perfect angel because he's a capitalist in an era of brutal exploitation. We get to see that he's not always fair. We know he's not paying his workers a livable wage. He has massive, visible, problematic vibes that he has to actively overcome for the story to work. Because Thornton doesn't have the generational security Mr. Darcy does. He's a far more vulnerable character than Darcy. I respect John Thornton as a character even more than a Mr. Darcy type, because to feel that much and to carry it quietly for so long while also having to figure out how to pay the workers and managing the mill and holding his family together and trying not to go bankrupt. That is not an easy life. And he doesn't become better through like a private epiphany in his garden or 5 different drawing rooms to choose from or a couple different balls that he went to. He becomes better through real life friction, through watching the people he employs suffer, through being forced by his love for Margaret to actually look at characters like Nicholas Higgins, who is a worker of his, and seeing how desolate his life is. To see him not as a striking worker threatening his livelihood, but as a man, as a father, as a human who has worth. His love is not romantic in the escapist sense that we see with so many romance novels on Book Talk. It changes his ethics and it changes how he runs his mill. When he starts facing bankruptcy, he still chooses to protect his workers' livelihoods over a risky speculation that could have saved him personally and made him a lot of money. He's the type of character that does the right thing when he has nothing to gain and no one is watching, which is why I feel like him and Mr. Darcy are kindred spirits, with Darcy figuring everything out between Wickham and Lydia and not wanting to let anybody know. There are some people who see him as kind of a rough, ill-tempered character, and I'm like, yes, I understand, but also he's got so many more things to deal with in life than a character like Mr. Darcy. And I'm not saying that we excuse bad behavior, but what I am saying is that when you have such a bottled character like Mr. Darcy, who we end up knowing very little about, it's so much easier to romanticize him and to criticize this other character who we know a lot more about and whose challenges are way different. For Margaret Hale's part, she also has a significant transformation. People gossip about her, her reputation takes damage, and she has to kind of navigate who she thought people saw her as and then what the reality actually was. She goes to the factories. She is debating men on stuff to do with society. She stands in front of a mob to protect a man she doesn't even particularly like yet. So her journey kind of mirrors Thornton's in a way. She arrives in Milton with a lot of class prejudice. She's got to confront the fact that her sheltered, genteel Southern upbringing has given her a completely distorted, rosy picture of the world. I think makes it one of the most powerful love stories of all time because it grapples with them having to dismantle their identities and make room for one another. The landscape was dominated by two things, the mill and the workhouse. Inside them was cotton and large steam engines and workers in cramped, often dangerous conditions. The environment gave birth to a new kind of social elite, which was the factory owner. These masters were the self-made men of the future, and they viewed the world through the lens of profit and productivity. Writing about the workhouse was doom and gloom because it exposed the dark underbelly of the progress the Victorian middle class was so proud of. Elizabeth Gaskell being personally in the middle of it all really mattered because unlike a lot of Victorian writers who wrote about the working class from a comfortable, theoretical distance, Gaskell was actually there, witnessing a lot of what was happening to working class people. She was married to a Unitarian minister, which meant that she was embedded in the social fabric of one of the most overcrowded, most difficult, most problem-ridden industrial cities in England. So Unitarianism emphasized something called the interconnection of all human hearts. This idea that every person, regardless of class or circumstance, whether they are a mill owner or a cotton operative slowly dying of fluff in their lungs in a pent-up house with no fresh air, is fundamentally morally connected to you. And you can feel that in North and South. Gaskell lost her only son as an infant in 1845. And she spoke about how that personal tragedy deepened her desire to give voice to the working families she saw around her. People who were also losing children, also suffering, but in ways that nobody with a platform seemed willing to write about, honestly. She was apparently burned in effigy by members of her own congregation because of how honestly she wrote about poverty and class and the messy, uncomfortable realities of industrial capitalism. And that's exactly why Gaskell is such a boss, in my opinion. Let's be real with one another here. It's easy to make a romance feel desirable when it's set on an estate with a sprawling garden or an ornate ballroom. But to take a setting defined by blackened lungs and absolute poverty and child labor and the crushing machinery of the industrial age and still weave a story of such profound longing and yearning that we are still swooning over 2 centuries later, that to me is a feat of literary genius. She was able to do an overt job of engaging us and informing us of atrocities at the same time in a social novel where the central plot is a romance. As someone who enjoys Charles Dickens' work, like I really do, big Nicholas Nickleby girly here, I think his stories can also do a good job at informing readers of the disparity of the classes in Victorian Britain. But I believe Charles Dickens is, at least in part, both responsible for North and South getting made and responsible for the fact that North and South is not as famous as it could be. North and South was serialized in a weekly magazine called Household Words, which was edited by Charles Dickens. And Dickens had very specific ideas about how industrial England should be written about. In his own novel, Hard Times, which is also about industrial capitalism and class conflict, that ran in the same magazine immediately before North and South. She's always writing in his shadow, to be honest, and under his editorial control. I feel like he thought that he was a better writer than her, and being able to give weird names to his characters like Miss Pissypot and Puddly Wiggins, he thought somehow that would land more seriously with audiences, which I guess he did end up being the more popular choice. He was patronizing about her pacing. He pushed her to compress and shorten chapters in ways that some believed harmed the novel's rhythm. His approach was satire and caricature and big symbolic gestures. Gaskell was writing from inside a more realistic way. To be quickly fair to Dickens, however, some scholars argue that his pressure actually forced North and South to become the masterpiece we know today. If Gaskell had her way, the book would have been a more narrow character study titled Margaret Hale. Scholars like Rosemary Bodenheimer and Niles Clausen suggest that Dickens' insistence on the title North and South is a huge part of why it became so culturally powerful. By shifting the focus from the individual to the geographical and cultural divide, Dickens helped elevate the novel from a standard heroine's journey into a condition of England epic. But this forced Gaskell to achieve something Dickens never quite achieved, a story that holds both sides of the industrial conflict with equal empathy and equal humanity and equal complexity. And I think that is extraordinarily hard to do. Gaskell doesn't give them a happily ever after that ignores the poverty around them. She gives them a gray area where two things can be true at one time, right? That he can be judgmental of the South and the beauties that can bring the more rural landscape. And she's been judgy about the North and how people have had to survive and innovation. It's a love story that respects its characters enough to let them be wrong and let them be messy and let them grow, but in a way more realistic setting of how the world is really like and how the cogs turn in society, which we don't always see that in romances, to be honest with you. In a lot of historical romances, some of that stuff is, painted over with a pretty brush. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but quickly, I want to talk about the adaptation and Richard Armitage's performance because we have to. Okay? We have to. In the book, he has deep religious convictions, and a lot of his yearning is an agonizing process of moral growth. Surprisingly modest and simple in how he views his love for Margaret Hale. He truly believes that he is unworthy of her refinement. There is a much more genteel version of Mr. Thornton than in the show. I think he's a bit more violent in the series, and so people think that that's what he's like in the book. And he is not as rough, to be honest with you. Richard Armitage does such an amazing job of taking that internal anguish and wearing it on his sleeve. Bless his heart. Like, I'm always stressed for John Thornton. Like, his intensity watching Margaret Hale. There is no way that this woman would not be able to tell that this man was in love with her. I'm sorry. Like, you are all this man wants. I really felt like he embodied such a great personalized version of Mr. Thornton. The 2004 adaptation leans into this like smoldering archetype. I feel like we were gifted this performance. Like, there's so many bad things that have happened in the world, but the BBC gifted this to us, okay? Also, if you didn't know, Richard Armitage is a really big, well-known audiobook narrator, and I just realized that he's maybe never narrated North and South. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what is going on? Can we fix that, like, ASAP, please? I can't seem to find anywhere where he has recorded it, but if he has, drop the link, please. A lot of what is in North and South are conversations that we are having in a different way. And I think it matters because John Thornton represents something we are genuinely hungry for in our romantic media right now. And I keep talking about how it's really hard to continually watch these period drama men who have nothing to do in their lives but sit in drawing rooms. And I feel like that we are yearning for men who kind of have to work and have to make a living or have to strive in some way, because that's the majority of society right now. Some of these new adaptations, it feels like we're in an era where hotness is a top tier requirement over character. And Thornton is not a hot, suave character. He is complicated, he is messy and difficult and gets things profoundly wrong. And he has to suffer and question himself and be humbled and actually grow to be the person he needs to be. And I feel like that strife is part of the reason that we love him. I feel like that's why the ending scene in North and South is so powerful, because he's got no pride left, because this man is broke, he's bankrupt. He has got nothing but loving her. And he allows himself to be vulnerable and just see what happens, really. In the final chapters of the book, the tables are turned for Margaret and Mr. Thornton. Margaret started the story as a displaced, struggling daughter of a clergyman, inherits a massive fortune, and most importantly, the ownership of the very ground that Thornton's mill stands on. Meanwhile, Thornton is essentially a ruined man. He's lost his business, not because he was bad at it, but because he was too ethical to gamble with his workers' lives in a volatile market. He is at absolute rock bottom. For a man like John Thornton, whose entire sense of self-worth was built on being a self-made provider who owed nothing to anyone, accepting that money, it shows that his love for Margaret has finally eclipsed his pride. This is where Gaskell really shows her genius, I think. By making Margaret the one who rescues the mill, she grants her a level of economic agency that is almost unheard of in typical period romances. She's his landlord and his business partner. She is the reason the mill survives. Thornton is no longer in control, really. He's a man who's had to learn that true strength is the humility to accept help and build something better together, and that we need one another. There is a respect in him having to realize that he needs his workers' trust and respect just as much as they need him for a job. I think that it's a feat of ingenuity, and I do not use that phrase lightly, to take a Pride and Prejudice enemies to lovers structure and drop it in the Industrial Revolution with all its darkness and death and pollution, and still come out the other side with a man who is likable and lovable and completely pining and yearning, and that we are like desperate over. And while I love Pride and Prejudice and Elizabeth and Darcy, I feel like North and South and John Thornton and Margaret Hale's story needs more attention culturally than it gets. Well, that is it for me, guys. Let me know in the comments, are you Team Thornton or Team Darcy or Team both, obviously? North and South, go watch it if you have not seen it. What are you doing watching this video still? If you have not seen it, go watch it right now. My hot take is that even though I don't think in any way, shape, or form we need to update the 2004 version, because I am biased and I believe it is perfection. I believe that the way that the world is now and the rise of AI and billionaires and the cost of living crisis, etc., we needed a North and South and a John Thornton adaptation for a new generation more than we needed a new Pride and Prejudice. I think North and South would absolutely slap right now, as the kids say. It's such a weird term. But yeah, I feel like a new generation would absolutely gobble that story up. Oh my God. Who would we cast as John Thornton? Can it just be Richard Armitage again? Okay, clearly I am not emotionally ready for a new North and South. So scratch that. Forget I ever said it. Yes, if you're wondering what I'm going to go do next, it is to put on North and South for probably the 5th time this year. Okay? Don't judge me. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.